The October 16th, 2013 meeting to order. We're going to go ahead and hold item 1 on the desk. We're waiting for DWP staff, and we will proceed with that. Mr. Prieto.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Item number 2, CAO and DWP report relative to authorizing the issuance of up to $380 million of water system revenue bonds. We have staff from Department of Water and Power as well as the CAO's office.
Come on up, CAO and DWP.
They're not here?
He went up.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Phil Leiber, and I'll be here to say a few words about the proposed initial resolution.
Mr. Iber, are you with the Department of Water and Power?
I am with the Department of Water and Power. I'm the Chief Financial Officer.
Very good.
So the department has proposed an initial bond resolution that would authorize up to $380 million of debt. This would fund a substantial portion of our capital improvement program for the current fiscal year. We propose to spend about $766 million on a variety of important programs for the water system. This funding would provide about one half of that. The balance would come from remaining funds from a previous bond offering as well as collections directly from ratepayers. The capital programs that, the capital projects that are supported by this are described quite nicely in the CAO's report. In general, there's 3 areas of benefits that these programs will provide. Those include our local water supply program, greatly expanding funding for water conservation, reclamation, stormwater capture, as well as the Safe Drinking Water program, providing funding for water quality programs, and our water supply reliability project that's funding related to rebuilding the aging infrastructure. So in total, it's $380 million. The bonds have a proposed term of not more than 45 years, a maximum interest rate of 12%, although in actuality, the bonds will probably have a duration of 20 to 30 years, and the interest rate will probably be closer to 4 to 5%. The funding in terms of rates that would provide the funding for the debt service on these bonds, it is contemplated in our current 13-14 fiscal year budget. So the debt service on this bond issuance would not require additional rate increases at this time. We have about $3.5 billion in debt outstanding presently, and these bonds would be structured to kind of layer in additional debt over the course of about 20 years with approximately level debt service. So we have 2 resolutions that are necessary. This initial resolution that comes to this committee and the full council, and just moments ago our board took action on the supplemental resolution, which provides a little bit more detail about the proposed offering, and that supplemental resolution would be effective upon the council's action on this first initial resolution. So that's a high-level overview of the program. If you'd like to hear more about the specific capital projects, we have a representative here from our water system who could talk about the benefits of those programs or any other questions you might have.
Sure. So I don't know if my colleagues want to hear a little bit more about the capital program. Clearly I think the capital programs are necessary, and we're going to have to sort of look at are they addressing our particular district needs, et cetera. But bring me up to speed a little bit on sort of how we're doing with our debt and bond issuances. When I was staff, over 10 years ago, I actually traveled with the department to New York to meet with the rating agencies to sort of understand how we were doing in their eyes. Bring me up to speed a little bit on bond issuance and how you all are sort of this latest sort of round. Are we in good shape? Is our rating in good shape? When's the last time we went to the market and looked for a significant sort of issuance like this one, and how do those rates sort of compare, our rating compared to then?
Okay. Well, we are fortunate to have at present very strong credit ratings. We are at the AA level by all 3 rating agencies. That's a very strong rating. We'd like to maintain that. It's important that we do so to maintain access to low-cost bond funding. Given the size of our capital program over the next 5 years, which is about $4.1 billion, we're going to be dependent on external financing for more than 75% of that. So it's very important that we maintain strong credit ratings so that we can issue these bonds at the lowest possible cost and help keep rates to all of our ratepayers as low as possible. So we have strong credit ratings today. We're taking what steps we think are necessary to maintain those, which includes maintaining compliance with strong financial metrics. There's a number of metrics that the rating agencies look to. They look to the quality of management and the quality of the plans that one has in place. So we've been having regular communications with the rating agencies over the past several months, and they've written opinions about where the department stands. They recognize that we have a number of challenges in front of us in these 3 areas, but they seem to believe that our plans are strong, and that's reflected in the ratings that we have.
So is now a good time to ask for 300? Are we asking for enough? I mean, if we're sort of at are we at our peak in terms of sort of confidence with the agencies?
Well, there are, of course, pros and cons to how much money you'd ask for. We have a large capital program in front of us. There's concern by some that interest rates may continue to go up, so that might argue for doing more now.
Right.
The contrary view on that is if you borrow more than you need at the moment, you have to do something with those funds. And there's a downside to that because we're borrowing at about 4%, and we'd have to turn around and reinvest those funds at something and earn a small fraction of that. So there's a cost involved in doing that. So we've done some analysis on weighing those 2 options, and we think that continuing with an issuance about once a year is probably the most cost-effective way to do it. But we are looking at those options.
And so how often will you all come back for, I guess one of the things that concerns me, and we talked a little bit about this when we were dealing with the MOU and the settlement agreement, it seems to me that 2016 is sort of a really interesting year for the utility in terms of our capital improvement program and our need to be able to maintain our good rating, balance that with sort of the debt service that we're going to be incurring. But at some point, that's going to have some real impact and need for rate increases. And you mentioned in your open that at this point, you don't anticipate having to, well, it shouldn't affect the rate increase, I think is what you said.
We can cover the debt service on this particular issuance with our existing rates.
Right.
That won't be the case for the subsequent bond offerings that we do foresee the need to make in future years. So we do have plans to come back to the council next year to ask for rate adjustments that would support those future bond offerings based on this capital budget and the other programs we have to implement.
So this issuance, we can basically take care of with your existing sort of financial sort of health.
Correct.
But how often do you all anticipate coming back to us for additional authority for the bond issuances? You mentioned once a year. So is this, again, you'll have to forgive me. I've been a little bit out of practice here, not being in the city for about 6 years. But will you be coming back every year for these capital programs that you're working on?
That would be the plan based on our current financial plan and outlook. That bond offerings about once a year would make sense for us. There's no magic or absolute template that one has to use of that. But based on the size of these offerings, based on the fact that you can't really turn around and reinvest these funds and earn a good return, the right balance seems to be about once a year for these issuances.
Yeah. And so how much longer do you think that we have to go before we have to start looking at the utilities revenue requirements? I mean, because at some point it begins to sort of boil over. We're incurring a lot of debt. You've got a lot of sort of capital programs, and we're going to have to really sort of look at our revenue requirement in order to maintain the enterprise as healthy as it is and keep its rating. Are we a year or two out from sort of having to do that analysis, or is there a schedule that you all can help us sort of understand, your debt, your capital, revenue requirements, and then, at some point where rates fit into that? Is there a sort of master schedule that...
There is. We have been trying to make do with our existing rates for as long as possible, and we've been fortunate in that we were actually scheduled to have a rate increase go into effect this year. We were able to push that off a good year You may recall, some of you may recall last summer we were talking about a rate adjustment for the water system. It would have gone into effect this summer, but because of a variety of factors, including our ability to access some very low-cost funding from the state, because of some refinancings that we did, we're actually able to find enough savings to put off the need for a rate adjustment for a full year. But our current outlook is that we would need a rate adjustment that would start around next summer of 2014.
Yeah, I guess going into the future, it'd be helpful, at least for my education, to have a schedule that sort of aligns the revenue requirements, the debt, the capital programs, and sort of where. I know it's hard to anticipate this, but where it is that we're going to have to really start having the conversation about rate increases. And I think the reason that would be helpful is maybe there are ways that we can be creative in restructuring existing debt and lowering our sort of need. I guess the thing that I'd like to get to is any way that we can have a conversation early and often about what impact it'll have on the ratepayer, I think is just smart on our collective parts. But maybe there's ways for us to be more aggressive to try to figure out how to help the financing of the enterprise so that so we can be creative as opposed to sort of saying, hey, we got to do it now because federal mandates, state mandates, we need the capital. The more lead time, I think, the healthier we can have a conversation. Again, the easy part for me is, what you want to spend the money for. I mean, there's clear need that there's a lot of deferred maintenance and, operations costs that we have to do so that we can provide the best reliable services. So that part is the easiest part for me.
Olivia Says of CAO's office. As part of the rate increase report or request from the department, they have a 5-year financial plan. As part of that 5-year financial plan, they include what their proposed debt is for 5 years out. And maybe included in that conversation, we can talk about how much goes out to debt, what is their debt ratio that is probably considered the best for the department, and when the refundings may or may not occur, or whatever other plan they have at that time. That whole discussion occurs whenever they're going to have a rate increase request. As part of that rate increase request, there is a third party, or in this case now, the Office of Public Accountability will do a revenue requirement study to see if they're looking at all possible ways of recovering revenue without going for the rate increase. And if they do go for a rate increase, the minimal rate increase that is possible. Right. So maybe during that discussion is when you should talk about what the credit or what the ratio of debt to cash is and what we should use.
That typically happens, it seems though it happens like 120 days, 90 days before the actual rate increase proposal comes forward, right? That's part of the study.
It's actually longer.
Those would be the minimums, and I can tell you that we plan to begin talking about these things well in advance of those minimums.
Sure.
So those were specified in some agreements with the neighborhood councils that for a multi-year rate action we had to do outreach to them at least 120 days in advance of that. But right. We will be well in excess of that.
Okay. That's helpful. And before we go to Mr. Blumenfield, when is the last time we went to go meet with the rating agencies to assure them that we're doing the best possible with the utility?
We've been in regular conversations with them. Just over the past 2 years, we've had over 9 bond offerings, both new money and refinancing. So we've had regular conversations with them over the past 2 years.
Very good. Mr. Blumenfield.
Yeah, I wanted to underscore the point that you're making, and I understand what you're saying about how when there's a time, but all of these are pieces to the puzzle. I mean, as we approve $766 million more of debt, that has a big impact on the things down the road. So it's kind of hard for me to compartmentalize the way that we're talking about, because we don't have the big picture that the chair was talking about in terms of seeing that all laid out. And so, it looks okay, great. This particular bond offering falls within our ability to pay given the current rates. But by taking it on, we're also making it that much more difficult to do the next step without increase. We're increasing the pressure for additional rates. Now, I'm not, I mean...
This is part of what was already approved, which was part of the 5-year plan that was presented during the rate increase. So actually, this is the second step to the rate increase that was already approved. But you're absolutely correct, but I'd like to assure the council that I've never, in the 30 years that I've been here, seen a rate proposal approved by the council in 120 days. It takes a lot more conversation. It takes a lot of neighborhood input. I mean, 6 months is really more like it when we talk about it, because every single portion of what's being talked about in the rate increase request by the department, I'm with the CAO, by the way, is reviewed by many parties until the council is satisfied with what they are voting on. So this discussion, and it can occur at any point in time that the chair feels that the committee would like to talk about it.
And that said, the outlook right now is it's probably going to be about a 1-year discussion. We really intend to begin our outreach to council members really in the coming weeks, talking about that next rate adjustment that would probably go into effect sometime about this time next year, frankly. So it'll be quite a lengthy conversation. And with reference to these 5-year financial plans, it is true that we put forward a rate proposal for the water system last summer. It was withdrawn at the last minute, but that plan is still out there. It's posted on our website. It's posted on the Ratepayer Advocates website. So that does give an indication of our outlook at that time. And we'll be preparing, in fact, are preparing a new financial plan that we'll begin outreach with in the coming weeks to talk about how all these puzzle pieces fit together.
And on the puzzle pieces, and maybe this is part of that second piece, but you mentioned sort of $4.1 billion worth of improvements, and there's a percentage of that is ratepayer, percent of it direct ratepayer, percentages revenue bonds. Do you have a rough breakdown on how that shakes out?
I do. Of the $4.1 billion that we foresee spending this year and the next 4 subsequent years, about $3.2 billion of that would be externally financed, and that's about 77%. And I do use that broader term, externally financed, rather than just department-issued bonds, because one of the things that we have been working on over the past several months is a new form of lower-cost financing that state legislation has just been passed. AB 850 was just signed by the governor last week. That was legislation that was sponsored by the city of Los Angeles that will give us the opportunity to finance these needed capital projects at even a lower cost than the department directly issuing these bonds. And we'll be telling you more about that, but what it will entail is creating a new joint powers authority like we already have on the power side, but this would be one for the water side, that could issue bonds, provide the funding to the department, and then collect the needed revenue to cover the debt service on those bonds directly from our ratepayers. And the advantage of this approach is it would avoid something called debt service coverage, where we have to collect basically $2 for every dollar we need in debt service. And it would also provide the lowest cost access to funds because it would have a AAA rating, so you get lower interest costs. So with this approach, which we are contemplating making use of, we believe we can save our ratepayers about 3 to 4% in terms of lower bills than what they otherwise would have been. So I just use that as an example when you indicated an interest in seeing us pursue every possible approach to try to mitigate this rate pressure. We will do so, and we look forward to your continued ideas and exploration of possibilities on that.
And the other 23%, not the 77%, is just...
That comes directly from ratepayer collections in a given year. So when I just made mention of the need for debt service coverage, on our existing bonds, we basically have to collect $2 for every dollar of debt service. That extra dollar actually provides funding then for that year's capital program. So that's how we get this additional 23% that would come directly from the ratepayers.
So that could switch if we start using the new mechanism. You'd be getting less than 23%.
Actually, that factors that in already. It would have provided more but the 23% recognizes that in our anticipated financial plan, we'll take advantage of this new JPA-sourced funding. And with that, we get about 23% of the capital program financed directly from our ratepayers. But overall, this is the approach that results in the lowest overall rates, which is really what we're aiming for.
A couple other questions, but I don't want to monopolize. If you want me to jump back either way.
Mr. Kretz, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions.
We'll go to Mr. Kretz, and we'll come back to Mr. Bloom.
Okay. One is, I know
And then Mr. LaBonge.
some critics said that one of the reasons the county's Clean Water, Clean Beaches measure didn't do as well as it could have was that there weren't specific, clear projects laid out in advance for the public to scrutinize. Do we just have budgeted amounts, or do we have specific projects already proposed and vetted and ready to be implemented as part of this proposal?
As part of this $380 million, we do have very specific programs, and we could get into as much detail as you'd like today on those. All of these programs were set forth in our budget for the current fiscal year, so 13-14. That was our final budget that was submitted to the council in May of 2013, just several months ago. So when I made reference to this $766 million capital budget, we have all the detailed projects, and I just kind of gave a very high-level overview and talked about the three categories, but we can drill down and talk about exactly what we're going to accomplish in terms of improving our local water supply, exactly what we're doing in the safe drinking water area, and so forth.
Well, I'll leave that up to the chair as far as how much detail you want today, but certainly it would be good to have some idea of what those projects are specifically. I know the Bureau of Sanitation and DWP have some of the same water and water quality interests. Have you worked together and discussed to see how these two departments can meet their mutual needs?
There is a lot of work underway with our sister agencies. Susan Regani can talk more about some of those partnerships and efforts.
My name is Susan Rogani. I'm from DWP. I'm Director of the Water Engineering and Technical Services. One thing I'd like to mention is, you asked about our partnerships with Bureau of Sanitation. We are working with them for the groundwater replenishment project, which would take groundwater basically from Tillman and actually effluent from Tillman, treat it to a higher level, and use that to recharge our groundwater in the San Fernando Valley. That's something that we are the lead agency for. However, we're working very closely with the Bureau of Sanitation because that's something that they will be working with Bureau of Engineering to have designed and constructed. So that's something that we have a partnership with them for, as well as working with them in the harbor area regarding their expansion of the Terminal Island Treatment Facility for additional expansion of recycled water in the harbor. So we are working with them very closely on those two areas as well as others.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. LaBonge.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Very much support the East Valley Water Reclamation Plant. Historically, which then Governor Wilson and then Mayor Reardon stood shoulder to shoulder to step forward with this, and by the time it was finally born, both of them were out of office and there was no parent to push it through to graduate, and it just sat there. How much of that is built now, the East Valley Water Reclamation?
We're going through the environmental process right now.
But there's some construction that took place over a decade ago.
Yes, that is correct. The pipeline is in existence.
Right.
It's there ready to take the water when we're finished.
And there's no pipeline on the Orange Line, right?
There may be some, but
There may be some.
Yes.
Because I remember Zev called me and asked me to get out of the way, Tom, because the Orange Line was coming. But the Orange Line was another place where we could use a pipeline. East Valley Water Reclamation is real important just to put back into the ground to pure it. I've been working the last 3 or 4 years or more on the River Supply Conduit, which is a major 96-inch line through Griffith Park, and I haven't focused on my recycle, which I wanted to. Right now you have a recycle project for, I think, Tank 112 in Griffith Park above Vista Del Val.
That's right. We have recycled water in Griffith Park to try to serve Roosevelt Golf Course and some other areas in
which is on the
Griffith Park.
south side of the
Right.
park. And there's another tank right by the observatory, I think 109, which I'd love you to do to service the bird sanctuary. Without water, there's no birds. And then there's tank 114 in Western Canyon, which I'm going to come at you. And unfortunately, as I look to my colleagues to the west, the sun is setting on my career, unfortunately. But I really want to get those tanks in line, and I did talk to your engineers, and I want to meet with you to make sure that we add those issues in there, because it's very important. And I also think it's very important that you work with the river community, because all the water that's in the river is still good, but we do have to leave some water in the river for the life of the river now. Prior to 1978, they cleaned the river out with bulldozers. There was no love for the river and no trees. And also, they had polluted water that didn't let anything to grow. Not water and power, but the effluent plants. Other engineers with science created a better water that goes into the river, and now there's life in the river. So there's a balance that needs to be there. And also, DWP developed the only check dam out at the old spreading basins near Forest Lawn. I'd like to see more check dams available so you could pull water out at the same time. Mr. Chairman, my deputy just came here to summons me back to the other meeting, so I wanted to vote on this, but I know Mr. Blumenfeld may have a few more.
I'll be brief. You got to go. So the interest rate question, you said it could vary from like 4% to 12%. Do we have any, does that come back to us if it does exceed that?
The bond, this initial resolution provides a maximum legal rate of 12%. We have absolutely no expectation that the interest would be anywhere close to 12%. If it was, we're not going to issue the bonds. The supplemental resolution that was just issued or just approved by our board moments ago, that set a maximum interest rate of 8%. But again, in all likelihood, these bonds are probably going to be issued in the 4 to 5% range. Market conditions do.
It's the board's
vary.
discretion. It's not a council action. In terms of if we think the interest rate's too high, you're saying, yeah, of course you would never do 12%.
Right.
But who's the backstop? Who makes that decision? Is it the board? Is it the council? Or I guess it could be either. We could step in if we thought.
Let me answer that for you, Councilman. The board can take an action, but the council can take a 245 action, which takes asserts jurisdiction over the board action. And you can request to see that supplemental request and ask for an interest rate. And if you're unhappy with that interest rate, then what you have to do is reject the bond and send it back to the board. And that's what happens in terms of the proprietaries. You can't change what they have. You only can accept or reject what they say. And then that would start the process all over again. So that delay also is going to have an effect on the rate.
Okay. In the interest of time, go ahead.
Very good. As you can tell, there's a lot of interest in sort of how you all work. So thank you for help informing us. We'll go ahead and take that item, and I don't think there's any objection. That item will move out of committee.
I'm going to go back to committee. I want to let you know 111 North Hope. The doors are open. Go in there. What floor are you on?
On the 15th floor.
15th floor on the southwest corner.
Yeah.
Go right in there and demand answers, and you'll get answers.
Mr. Labange, what other committee is more important than this one?
No, water. Without water, we're nothing. I have to go back to this other committee, but one thing I know, I'm not going to be here for, but Mr. CLA, the only thing I wanted to ask, can I just
On
say
number
that?
one?
That there'll be annual reviews from top to bottom, from bottom to top of every employee at DWP. There's no reviews of employees there. And I think everybody needs it because there's tremendous people who work at DWP who do great things for this city, but annual reviews, and it's not in the contract, but I think from the top to the bottom, whether it's annual or every 18 months or whatever it is, I think it would be good. I did work at DWP, and that's one of the first things I asked for, and they said it's not in our contract. So and that was last century when I was over there. I love Mulholland. Okay, that's enough.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Very good. This item is out. We'll go ahead to item number 3 now.
Item number 3. Mr. Chair, item number 3, CAO report relative to proposed contract with Myron Electric Construction Company for the provision of specialized high-voltage services associated with the wastewater treatment plants. Staff from the CAO and the Bureau of Sanitation.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Elise Matson, CAO. Item number 3 on the agenda is a CAO report on a contract with Myron Electric Construction Corporation for specialized high-voltage electrical services to modify, modernize, and perform preventative and predictive maintenance of the high-voltage electrical distribution infrastructure at the city's wastewater treatment plants, water reclamation plants, and sewage pumping plants. Electrical distribution systems are vital to all plant operations in that they provide electricity to the city's treatment plants. Without proper maintenance of these electrical systems, the wastewater treatment process is at risk of coming to a halt, which could result in sewage spills or permit violations. The services in this contract will reduce the potential for these types of emergency electrical failures by maintaining the safety and effectiveness of the high-voltage electrical infrastructure. The total term of the contract is 6 years, and the maximum funding for this contract is $6 million. Because the term of the contract exceeds 3 years, council approval is required. Sufficient funds are available within the Sewer Construction Maintenance Fund to support the first-year costs of the contract, and future year funding will be provided through the city's annual budget process and subject to mayor and council approval. Our office recommends that the council authorize the Bureau of Sanitation to execute the contract with Myron Electric Construction Corporation.
Very good, thank you. And you are?
Good afternoon. My name is Bahram Roshanian. I work at Hyperion Treatment Plant. I'm the maintenance manager there, and I'm the project manager for this contract.
Very good. And there was only one responsive bidder to the contract?
That is correct.
Is that typical for this type of very specialized need?
Yes. When we issued the RFP, and we only had 2 bidders that bid this contract, and one of them was deemed non-responsive to good faith effort, and the Myron Electric was selected. And we have had Myron Electric basically was working in Hyperion for the past 20 years, installed most of the electrical system there. So we have had very good working relationship with them. And that's why we felt comfortable going with one contractor only.
Very good. Well, the CAO says it's okay. Members? Okay. Very good. That item is out without any objection. Thank you very much. Item number 4.
Item number 4, Public Works Report relative to proposed revisions to the fees for the Japanese gardens located at Donald C. Tillman Water Reclamation Plant. And Mr. Chair, this item was referred back to committee, I believe, last December as a result of looking at requests from the committee at the time to look at the filming fees for it, and if perhaps sanitation could adjust them.
I'm going to guess Mr. Labange would be very interested in this committee item. Sir?
Gene Ream, Bureau of Sanitation, Japanese Garden. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. So do you have a presentation that you'd like to make? The item was referred back to committee, Mr. Prieto, is that what you're saying?
Yes, it was, with the request that the Bureau of Sanitation take a look at the fees associated with filming. And I believe they've done that and provided a new report.
Very good. So that new fee, right now there currently isn't a fee for filming. Now it would be $500. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's a reconsideration from $2,000 to $500.
Very good. And have you all done any outreach to the community about the proposed fee increase? Is the community aware? I mean, it's nominal, but it is a very sort of special place, and it's got a big following, and there's, I think, a real active network. Have you all notified folks of the potential fee increase?
No, we have not. Our advisory, this is after 16 years, has been no fee increases. The fees we generate there from any source goes back to use our special programs, our dose and volunteer program, and anything we do there at the plant. The Bureau of Sanitation pays for the base maintenance, and everything above that is on the trust fund itself. So we did no outreach at our current fee at $3. Everybody's amazed that we're not at $6, $8, or $10, or $12. So I'm there quite a bit, and I get the, gee, this is awful low, and we're trying to keep it low. And I say we're going to raise it to $5. They say that's still very appropriate. Students are always free on tours. Seniors get a discount too, and so we all win-win on this situation. Again, we're trying to look at resources to fund programs. I deal with about 58 volunteers, and we support that. It's a big program we have there. So this is just the next step for the next, I assume, 10 years. We won't be asking again for anything.
That's great. Mr. Blumenfield, this used to be in your assembly district, right?
It is.
Isn't it gorgeous?
It's fabulous. It's one of my favorite places, and you guys do a great job in keeping it up, and it's a wonderful location.
Thank you.
So starting out with that, but I do have a question, though, about how, even though it's, $5 doesn't seem like a lot, it's a 40% increase. Do you have listed what would be the 40%? Will you have an equal 40% increase in services? If so, are those services outlined somewhere? What is the money specifically going to go to?
The money specifically goes for, a good example is in our administration building, there was no TVs, no outreach for water reclamation or any cultural arts. The trust fund paid for all the installation of the whole system. It was about $22,000. We had a nursery in the back that we had to have in there to support the plants we no longer grow in the industry. That was, again, $48,000 was by the trust fund. We put some restrooms into the studios used in the back, and there was another $22,000. So we try to invest back into the facility. Every dollar that this goes to a trust fund and goes right back out. The next programs will be our cultural enhancement of our programs. We expect to go to, instead of 3 a year, to 12 to 16 per year. We have to pay some people to come in, stipends to come out. We have origami coming up. One of the masters wants $200, the other one wants $80. Ikebana, we pay for the flowers, we pay for lunch. Some of them is transportation. So it all goes back to our advisory, Mayor's Advisory Group suggests programs, and we follow through to fund them through this money.
So there's not an out. I mean, what I hear you saying is that we get more money, we'll do more programs.
Exactly.
And that, but we don't have. It's not like in a lot of agencies, I guess. When there's a request for an increase, what you generally expect is sort of a spreadsheet of this is what you get. This is a little bit backwards. I mean, it's one of my favorite places, so I'm not objecting to it on those grounds, but it's just from my sort of budget hat, it's backwards. Usually I expect to see we're justifying the increase because this is the need and have it spelled out, not if you give us more money, we'll spend more, we'll do more good programs.
Understand.
I don't know if there's a way to get a better handle on that or if that's how it's traditionally done, but it does seem.
Well, this is why we come to committees like yours. If you want more information, I'll be happy to provide it. I'll go back. Our advisory group has a lot of programming. We have the person that does different programs for the community through Screwball. He's just got involved in our advisory group. He has a lot more contacts and outreach capabilities. And so I can go back and I could list those and I could email to the chair if you'd like to review that, or I can come back to the committee again, whatever you'd like to do. But opportunity is there. We have a building hopefully being built, I hate to say a visitor center, multi-use center. We're now in a trailer in the parking lot, and we can't do anything else. We're going to have a plaza built so we can do more of these programs and have the money there. If I wait to get the money, do the programming, then I have to wait for 2 years to get the money to do the program. So I'm almost, it's a cart before the horse, but again, the horse is on its way down the road. I need to catch up the horse here. So when that plaza gets in, we want to advance plan all those programmings for the building and for the plaza and for the public. This all goes back to the public. So I can come up with again, a good scenario for you, sent to the chair about these potential future programs and current ones also that we plan, if that would help out.
That would certainly be helpful to have.
No problem.
Mr. Prieto, for historical purposes here.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I had actually forgotten. Just to clarify, it was actually Mr. Koretz who initially requested at the committee that the Bureau of Sanitation take a look at these filming fees. So just want to clarify that for the record.
Right.
Mr. Kretz?
And I did that because I think our elected brethren in the state legislature are not always as cognizant of filming issues as we would hope they would be. Present company, former legislators accepted. The last thing I think LA should be doing, since there aren't as many good opportunities to help support filming, is adding any kind of a fee that hasn't been there before. So while I objected to the 2,000 and asked that it be eliminated, 500 is a step in the right direction. 0 would be where I'd like to see it, so I will at least be one no vote against this unless we are able to amend out the $500 filming fee.
Let me clarify the no fee to fee. Citywide, the record parties gets $300 fee to use the facility. We were getting $300 fee per day, but Mayor Vivagosa came in. He didn't realize there was a Japanese garden and sanitation, so he eliminated the fee. So really, we've been without a fee where everybody else is getting a fee. Our advisory group has thought this would be unfair from the start. The Japanese garden also, we allow the studios to bring their equipment on site, bring their catering on site, which normally they have to pay $1,000 to $2,000 off site to do this thing. So we're trying to be proactive, and I've been working with the filming since day one, 20 years. We're not trying to make money from them, as a matter of fact, we're trying to just help us, assist us with the program that we do there at the garden. And it is wear and tear on the garden, the cabling, the things go in, there is things we have to take care of when they're gone. So just to clarify, there was a $300 fee in the past, eliminated, and now we're asking for a reinstatement, but just to $500.
And personally, I'd like to see us go back in the direction that we were in at zero and replicate that elsewhere in the city. I mean, we do it in City Hall as an example and other places because we recognize that even though it costs us money, the more we get filming in Los Angeles, the more we get filming in California, the more a multiplier effect exists. And I think keeping it at zero, if nothing else, sends a good message for the city. So I would move that we amend this to keep it at zero.
Is there a way to do a cost recovery instead of a fee, or would that?
I think it's essentially probably the same thing. I wouldn't be surprised if the cost is more than what we're asking for in the fee.
Yeah, cost is when the film companies leave, I have to have the staff clean up after them during restrooms, the garden itself. We do a lot of coordination with the studios as far as site visits. I have my staff involved in that thing too. So it's again, if you go to zero, there is a cost to us already helping the industry. We do quite a bit of help with the industry, allowing the trucks to come on site. Now, if the trucks were left off site, like other facilities, and the cameras left off site, I think that would help well not to have as much damage done as they do. So,
or a deposit kind of thing, where you make it instead of a fee, make it a deposit. You know, where you then, if there is any cost, you can recover that $500 worth. But
over the years, I've been in this a long time, and probably you weren't around at that time because you're too young. What happens is they do limited partnerships now. And what happens is when the last shot is done the last day, it's dissolved. We've had damage to the garden in the thousands of dollars we could not recover because it's been dissolved. So part of this helps to recover that thing that we cannot get back. Again, the big studios are gone. A lot of them around, but in the garden, it's all small studios trying to get them foot in the door. And so this helps us to really recover maybe damage. If you hold a retention fee, we can hold $500, $1,000, or $10,000. It goes through film on the label. What do you withhold? One of our black pine trees, if you damage, is worth $22,000. And so I can't, it's what do you withhold? Reasonably, again, the best way is just to over time, the damage is taken care of through this small amount of fee that's put in the trust fund. That's what we look at.
So why don't we do this? We'll continue the item for 2 weeks. My strong preference would be to align whatever rates it is that we charge with Rec and Parks, because Mr. Koretz, I think, raises a really good point that we want to encourage film in Los Angeles and California, and I don't think, Mr. Koretz, you'll find bigger proponents than myself and Mr. Blumenfield having authored legislation. But at the same time, I struggle with the quality of our parks. We don't do nearly as good of a job as the County of Los Angeles does, and so there's going to be a balance here, I think, to try to figure out how to have some cost recovery so that we can maintain parks, especially this one. It's such a specialized park. I mean, just the fauna there is so specific and so delicate. So why don't we hold it for 2 weeks, and we'll put together some ideas and figure out if we can at least look at that. But certainly the weddings and the luncheons, I don't think there's any problem with jacking up the rates there, right, gentlemen?
I don't have problems with any of the other rate increases.
Very good. All right.
the one thing I would like to see, and it's not because I have a problem with the rate, but I would like to just sort of from a fiduciary hat see sort of an outline of what we would get for, for those fees specifically.
All right.
But
so why don't we?
I wouldn't stop the item for that, but if
Sure.
it's being continued anyway, it would be nice to get that.
I think that's fair. So I think you've heard sort of wanting a menu of items that we would be able to purchase with the additional revenues, provided that the committee and the council adopted them, and then we will figure out how to align whatever the filming fee is and see if we can satisfy Mr. Koretz's concern, and then we'll see what we get. So we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Always nice.
All right. Without objection, item 5 and 6 we'll go ahead and receive and file, as there is no need for those contracts, and we'll take it to item number 1 now.
Item number 1, discussion item relative to CAO report to make presentation in regards to Department of Water and Power work rules, letter agreements, work practices. Mr. Chair, a report has been submitted by the CAO last 24 hours. We have staff from both DWP and the CAO.
Very good. If the CAO wouldn't mind, would you sort of help us understand what my motion, Mr. Krikorian's motion, asks for, and then we'll hear from the department.
Certainly. Marita Aspen from the CAO's office. As our report indicated, we have negotiated a tentative agreement between the City of Los Angeles, the Department of Water and Power, and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers that represents approximately 90% of the employees at DWP. And in that tentative agreement, it includes provisions to comprehensively look at all of the various work rules, all of the letters of agreement that exist at the Department of Water and Power, and bring those both to the Energy and Environment Committee and to the EERC, because most of those items are going to involve mandatory subjects of bargaining that we have to negotiate between the city and the unions, which are under the purview of the EERC. But the department is also putting together a comprehensive list, as I said, for the first time, that we'll be able to bring to your committee so that you can get an idea of the breadth of those particular agreements. And the department is here and can give you further details on those agreements.
Rose Garcia, the Department of Water and Power, Director of Labor Relations. We have already put together our list of the outstanding letters of agreement that are not incorporated today in the MOUs of the bargaining units. We have about 75 agreements that are from the 1990s to the present. None of them are salary agreements, but they are agreements that have addressed portions of the MOU that are non-salary issues. The reason why I mention that is because there's two governing bodies for our letters of agreement. The council is the governing body of all the salary ones. So any of the letters of agreement that went to council that were salary-based, meaning a bonus, a premium, some type of additional pay, it went to council and it got incorporated in the MOU. The provisions of which that are non-salary based, which are, I'm trying to think of an example, where we might say employees can have the 980 and only, that'll be the normal work schedule and 540 would be the exception. If we have an agreement about 980 work schedules. That's a non-salary based agreement. Those are approved by our board, and those are one of the 75 that we've narrowed it down to, the ones that need to be incorporated into the MOUs. So we have that list. In addition, work rules is very broad, and I think it's broadly presented. And I say that because we have a provision on our administrative manuals called working rules, but I don't believe the council meant just that small little section of our administrative manual when you were talking about us taking a look at our work rules that govern how we do business. So we're taking a look at our retirement plan. We're taking a look at our disability plan, the sick leave issues, which are in our disability plan. We're taking a look at our administrative manuals, of which there's 4 volumes. We're looking at our working rules, and we're looking at our MOU provisions to identify what we call work rules, of which have caused the department problems, caused us where we don't necessarily agree with whatever was negotiated or whatever was put into the manuals 20, 30 years ago. We've identified at least the ones that are of concern to management. We obviously have been reading the paper, so we know some of the ones that are of concern to the city council and to other people. But again, that process, once we get that list of rules, all the ones that we consider concerned, we'll present those to the JRB, because the way the agreement was written, it's a JRB. Council may have others that they want us to look at. CAO may have others that they want us to look at. So we'll present that to the EERC initially to see if there's more that they want us to incorporate into that list before we start tackling that. And we have till September 2014 to tackle those work rules.
Have you had a chance to look at the motion that I authored, Mr. Krikorian?
Yes, I have.
And so the second operative paragraph asks for the work rules and side agreements and sort of creating an inventory of those so that this committee could review them, with the understanding that some of these will have to likely go to ERC, some will have to go to JRB, some will likely have to stay at the commission. But the sort of universe of side agreements and work rules is what the committee asked for. And so in your presentation, you mentioned that some will go to ERC and some will go to JRB. I didn't hear you say preparation of the sort of aggregated list coming to this committee, and it's my understanding that nothing has been transmitted to the CAO as of yet.
Correct. Nothing was transmitted to the CAO's office as far as what you're asking for. We did transmit our approach and how we intended to address those things to the CAO's office, as far as the fact that we were going to identify them, make a list of. We provided what those were, such as meaning by title. We didn't provide the volumes of books. We absolutely can photocopy them and provide the volumes of books. But we did provide everything that I mentioned, the fact that our work rules were incorporated into the retirement plan, the disability plan, the 4 volumes of administrative manuals, the 14 MOUs, or 10 because we were dealing with IBW, and the working rules themselves, because it's a category. We have those. We can make photocopies and make them available. We have our approach, which is what we sent to the CAO's office, is our approach of how we intended to tackle it, to see if this committee was okay with that approach. My understanding was that they were going to have it addressed back to EERC, so I thought we were going to present in front of EERC as that explanation.
So I'm glad somebody brought you the motion there. So help me understand your approach then, because I have not had the benefit of seeing anything or been communicated to an approach that the CAO or you all would be presenting to a council committee. So let's just sort of talk about this one for a second. What is that approach? How are you going to develop the tranches of all of those different items, and how are you going to recommend and to whom which of those items will be presented to? ERC, this committee, DWP Commission? What is that process that you're alluding to?
Mr. Chair, if I could ask a further question, just get a little more detail. What it sounded like is they're going to photocopy every single word, every single rule. I imagine what you're looking for is a relatively brief summary of each of those rules, so it's more usable and digestible for us.
That's exactly right. So I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about the process and then get to your point here, which is, we don't want volumes of your work rules or that sort of thing. What we want is exactly what the motion asks for, which is identifying the relevant work rules, side agreements that could have an impact on reducing overall costs. Forget sort of rate increases and all of the sort of things that we put into the motion. Or that contribute to cost, and then helping us identify which of those tranches is suitable for a governing body like this one, or EERC, or JRB, or the DWP Commission, to at least have the benefit of having a presentation and then contemplating whether there's something to do or something not to do. I think Mr. Koretz's point is at least obvious to me. We don't want photocopied volumes of books. What we want is your analysis, ideally shepherded by the CAO, helping us understand the universe of things that are out there and how we're going to parse them out so we can understand which part of the city of Los Angeles could address them, and ideally have an audience to and suggestion to try to add some sunshine to the process. Because what we found, I think, in the joint hearing is that a lot of these revelations come as a result of reading a newspaper, and I think what I would like to see is an inventory of what is, in your opinion, able to be addressed by the City Council, by the Commission, maybe even the Mayor, and then we can have a conversation about where we can start focusing our work. To underscore Mr. Koretz's point, photocopies of work rules don't help us in our, and that doesn't even address the benchmarking sort of request that I had in the motion, but that would be a start.
Follow up on this topic. I mean, photocopying volumes doesn't help, but it would help having some of that in the public record. I don't know how much of that, and this committee may be the appropriate avenue to put those things, because unlike ERC, we are not behind closed doors, we're open session. So there is some utility to, sunshine is a great disinfectant, and getting all those work rules out in the public eye and doing it through this committee as the sort of first step before we go parsing which they go in which place. And so a follow-up, are any of these rules, or are all of them publicly available in any place, and is there a reason why it cannot be?
Not to mention, we can go into closed session at any time and agendize it. So in the event that there aren't some that are available to the public for whatever reason, for conversation's sake, we can certainly have the conversation here in closed session.
And let me just clarify that after we reviewed your motion, we did schedule a meeting between the CAO, the CLA, the Department of Water and Power, the ratepayer advocate, and the city attorney to kind of try and set up a working group and a process. So the first part of that is identification of all the work rules and all the documents. But what we're planning to do is bring that group together again once we get a handle on what all those documents are, so that we can parse it out and say, what is the purview of the commission, what is the purview of the EERC, what is the purview of the department. And we can certainly put together a comprehensive list and categorize it in that fashion. And bring it back to you for review.
That would be very helpful, especially since the letter report that you all wrote didn't indicate that that's what would happen. It's essentially said, if there's going to be modifications to all of this, it should be done at ERC. And I don't dispute the fact that some of these items are going to be very sensitive and will necessitate maybe meet and confer. I just want to sort of zoom to the 30,000-foot level and understand what these items are, how many of them are there, what it is that falls into this committee or the council or the commission's sort of jurisdiction. But I don't have any idea, for example, as to how many work rules, side agreements there are, period. And so the hope of this motion was to begin to start having a process where we have some transparency. Disinfectant, I don't know that anything's infected just yet, but I don't have any idea as to what it is that the process is or the inventory of those items are, and that was the chief purpose of the motion, and I know that you've been wanting to sort of respond, so help me understand when we will get that.
The inventory's been done. So
Has
as
it been
far as
transmitted to the CAO?
no.
Okay.
The inventory has been done as far as identifying the letters of agreement, of which have to be incorporated. They've been summarized as far as what they are and what they affect, and whether it affects a working rule, generically used, or the MOU. As far as are they public, are all those documents public? They are public documents, because every letter of agreement got approved by the board, and therefore it's a public document. All those manuals and policies I talked about, those are public. They're on our website. They're public manuals, so that's not a problem. When I say I'll make copies of it, I don't mean the whole manual, but if I'm saying let's revise the disability section of the disability plan that gives you the sick time that hit the paper, it's 3 paragraphs in the disability plan, of which is about a 4-inch manual. I'm just talking about the page, so that you see the source document that caused us to get where we were at. So we have the summary of the letters of agreement. We don't have a summary yet of all the working rules, because mainly because it's every day we find another one that could be added to that list. But we have a running list of rules that we believe should be addressed. But that's from just the department's perspective. That's not from anyone's else's perspective
Sure.
yet.
Well, we can certainly start there. I mean, that's
Sure.
very exciting stuff. So the list that you do have of the working rules, no, that's the second list, the
Letters of agreement.
letters of agreement. When will that be transmitted to the CAO?
It can be transmitted today or tomorrow.
Fantastic.
Well, probably tomorrow.
The motion
except
asked for it 30 days ago, so that would be great. And the running inventory, is that understanding that it's a draft and a work in progress? There isn't any problem sharing that with the CAO at this point?
No, it's not.
Because it's a running list and we'll amend it, and clearly, the universe of those two lists, how big are we talking?
As I mentioned, the letters of agreement, there's about 75, that's a rough estimate, but it's about 75 that date from 1990 to the present for all the IBW, the 10 MOUs of which were part of the motion.
And then the working rules, you say those keep popping up every day, and we don't have a hard, fast count of them.
I have about 20 that we want to address. when I use the term work rule, or the way I interpret your use of the word work rule, some of those are practices. So there may be a rule that says you get sick time. It's how the department over the years has interpreted a particular portion or applied it. So while we may provide you the rule, it's also the practice. So it's
Sure.
a practice and a rule.
So again, the second operative paragraph of the motion was to help sort of confine. I think it's the second one where it says identifying any of those work rules that lead to high overtime rates, including overtime associated with the odd-hour shifts, outsourcing premiums, and identifying options to mitigate excessive overtime rates and control costs. That's sort of the anything outside of that. Maybe we get to after we get through these.
Right.
But that would sort of be the parameters by which I would hope that you would catalog work rules.
Yes, and we can and we have. And we've already done the financial piece of it to see how much is that one costing us for at least last year.
Okay. And you're confident that we can transmit that over to the CAO so they can, as a second set of eyes for the council and the mayor, take a look at that and help sort of get what the spirit of the motion is asking for done for us?
There should be no problem.
Okay. Very good. Mr. Blumenfield.
Yeah, and how do we, in the work rules, I'm trying to get my head around. I mean, how do we know when we can put a box around it? We say these are the work rules, and know that there's not another one that's going to come up.
I actually don't think you can because, as I mentioned, our work rules, and which is what's in our summary to the CAO's office, our work rules. We have the civil service rules are our work rules. The charters are work rules. Our 4 administrative manuals are our work rules. Our retirement plan, we have a lot of things that we do business by.
Or at least maybe work putting a box around the ones that have
the overtime
significant
applications.
Impact on the costs issues. You know, all the things that the chairman mentioned. You know, in terms of being able to say, okay, there are no outstanding work rules other than these here that have any more than a 5%, or X% impact on, overtime or salary or anything else. Is there a way that we can sort of definitively put a box around it and say, okay, we know that there is no other rules out there that it rises to that percentage impact?
We do in the sense that we've done the financial analysis to say, based on employee costs that are dollars that go to the employee, in other words, dollars in their pocket. We've done the analysis to say every timekeeping code, every way an employee gets paid is usually tied to a code. So of those, how much is that code costing us to give that provision? And then I've tied the provision to that code, the work rule to the code, to the dollars.
And those are about 20, you say, from your perspective?
20 that are significant to us that fall
because
around.
The general manager, Mr. Nichols, when he testified, if I remember correctly, he mentioned that there were hundreds of work rules.
There are hundreds of work rules.
And of those hundreds, you only think the 20 that you, I mean, to me it seems like there's got to be, well, it's hard to sort of know what there is until we sort of see your definition of what ought to be snagged in the ones that have some impact on wages and costs, et cetera. But I think if you start there, that's very helpful to us because then you can say, here's the entire hundreds of them. Here are the ones that we believe, based on the definition of it affecting cost and overtime, that you ought to look at. At least that gives us the ability to say, okay, once we've gone through those, come back to the outstanding ones, and maybe you can help categorize those for us in terms of what you think they impact. If it's not direct benefits and codes to employees, does it have a system sort of effect? Does it have a rate impact effect? Does it have a bonding capacity effect? I mean, those are, then we can get to those, but I'm just eager to get to a list. And I haven't yet gotten my happy little fingers on anything yet other than your page and a half explanation that I probably can't touch most of it once I get it. But
I'll share my list.
Oh, that would be, you don't understand how much joy that's going to bring me.
We will report back with a list.
Mr. Blumenfield, anything else before we go to Mr. Kretz?
Well, I don't want to, one quick thing and then I'll jump, sorry. I just want to sort of put a flag in it. You mentioned that there was a distinction between sort of things that impact salary in terms of that would go to the council and other things, overtime, sick time, that might not go, or in terms of the work rules. And I just wanted to sort of put a flag in that because I get concerned about that distinction between sort of compensation and salaries, saying sort of salaries are in this bucket here in terms of what has to go back. And this came up with the work rules that were, in the papers and that were the big issue on sick leave was, well, that didn't have to go to the council because it wasn't a direct salary issue. And I just sort of want to put a pin in that.
We haven't separated the list by saying this is not in your jurisdiction, therefore we're not going to give it to you. We haven't separated the list. It's all the rules. We will have a category that'll say where we believe it's going to fall, that to change this, it's going to go to the board. To change this, it will go to council. To change this, it will, but not, it's one list,
I
not
got you.
separate.
And there may be some interpretation issues as to which of those things, and that's why it's really important for us to look at the overall list, go to council versus which of these things go to the board.
Yeah, I can tell you that there are definitely differences in how we view some of those areas, and that's why we're specifically putting language in the MOUs that specifies that the EERC will be able to direct, some of these investigations on these items.
I guess my point was just to put a pin in it and let you know that's something I'm particularly concerned about to make sure that we sort of all get on the same page as far as what's what.
Understood.
Mr. Koretz.
Yeah, first of all, what's this 2-page memo that's been talked about? Did everybody get that, or were they supposed to?
I believe I spoke with David Hirsch about it this afternoon, and he did have a copy.
Okay, well, I wasn't aware of that.
I do have extras.
It's a real cursory overview.
I'd love to see it if you have it. Can you walk us through the current process? How does a work rule letter of agreement get processed currently? What's the process been?
Depending on where it's going to end up, if it's not going to be in the MOU. If we have a work rule currently, it runs through, again, if it's impacting unions, because every wages, hours, and working conditions impact unions, we negotiate the work rule as opposed to this is what we want to change, or if it's a brand new one, we just notify them, but this is what we want to change. We allow them time for comment and concern, and once we've come up with an idea of what that work rule will look like, it starts with senior management wanting a work rule to cover it, and then we talk to labor about it, and then it goes to our board to have it incorporated and approved and put in the right place of what it's tied to. If it's tied to our retirement plan, then obviously it has some other steps to go through because it's go to our big board, then it goes to our retirement board, then it goes back to our big board before it gets into our retirement plan. So it depends on what kind of work rule it is.
Does the council have any involvement and oversight?
If it gets into our MOU, if it's a rule that's union specific, the fact that the council approves our MOUs in their totality because it's a contract of greater than 3 years, then it comes down to council, but it wouldn't be singled out for you to even know that the work rule was in there. A new rule was added to it.
So an item like the sick leave wouldn't normally come to council even though it impacts a fair amount of dollars?
No. Yeah, it is, but he was just mentioning that it's a benefit versus salary. Yes, it is, but no, it doesn't, because the city charter says that the board has sole responsibility for establishing health care benefits and other benefits, including our sick leave benefits. And when our sick leave benefits were first given to us from the board in the 1940s, the board took action. And so every amendment, of which the last one was in the 1980s, came to the Board of Water and Power Commissioners, never came to the council. Because it's an amendment to the disability portion of our retirement plan, which is under the purview of the board.
And it sounds like from what you've said that you possess what we asked for, so why don't we have it?
I have the rules. We haven't put all the work rules into a spreadsheet of which to give you. To be honest with you, we thought it was going to be handled by another body, and so therefore we've been putting the documents together in preparation for the EERC to call us on it. That's what we thought we were doing.
Okay, that makes some sense. All right, thank you.
Okay, well, I don't think there's an awful lot to talk about until we actually get some paper. So I guess I'm struggling a little bit with the confusion because I think the motion was very clear that this committee was asking for work, and so now that we've got clarity on the issue, I'd like to ask the CAO and DWP just sort of rough idea as to when you think we could aggregate that information, get it into a spreadsheet, have it so that the CAO can review and present before this committee. Do you think 2 weeks is enough time?
Well, once we get the information, what I'd like to do is convene another meeting of the working group so that we can have the CLA and the ratepayer advocate and the department all get together and kind of categorize it for you. I'd appreciate 30 days, but we can certainly try to do it in 2 weeks if
Okay. Why don't we do this? I love the idea of getting the working group together, including our ratepayer advocate. I think that's really important. And why don't we just sort of come back in 2 weeks and let us know where you are and sort of getting the stuff together, and then at that point, if we need to come back and have a substantive conversation about sort of where we are on it, I think we can do it then. I'm pretty confident that this isn't going to be a sort of a 30-day or sort of 60-day item. I think I know that my goal is to get together this inventory and then try to understand where, if anywhere, there's a place for us to be able to be creative or innovative or authoritative in trying to help minimize the overall cost. If nothing else, I think having this opportunity to air it out in committee helps you all an awful lot, as opposed to just sort of reading about it and piecemealing sort of the information to the public. And it certainly gives us, in our capacity, the ability to try to help in governing the enterprise. Understanding that a lot of this will fall before the commission, some of it, thankfully, in the new JRB process, which I think is a real important part of how we're going to resolve these things in a very amicable way with our labor force. And then others that will fall before this council. So I want to thank you in advance for all of the hard work that you're going to do in getting this put together for us. Mr. Koretz?
I wonder if I could ask a couple more questions.
Sure. After my close, why not?
Sorry about that. On a slightly different issue, do the supervisors in DWP perform annual performance reviews of employees?
No, they do not.
Is there a reason why? I mean, how do we know if somebody's doing their job proficiently?
The primary reason is because a former general manager about 30 years ago negotiated away our ability to evaluate employees.
Does that seem like a wise idea?
No, it does not. And we have in our labor contracts, all of our labor contracts, because about 5 years ago we tried to bring them back. And so all of our labor contracts include a paragraph that say that the parties agree to meet and try to come up with an evaluation process that we both can live with. Something like that's a paraphrase.
Well, as we're trying to, I think, clean up some of our personnel-related processes with DWP, as we presumably try to come up with a better way to handle these work rules, if we might also look at that issue at the same time, I think that would also be a positive.
Sure.
Thank you.
Members, any additional questions or comments? We'll take that as the close. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Sure.
Mr. Prieto, there isn't anything else on the docket, is there?
No, there is not.
Very good. We stand adjourned. Thank you.